Welcome, everybody. Today we are at Wayzata Sailing on the beautiful shores of Lake Minnetonka in downtown Wayzata. It's a beautiful sunny day. We may have some friendly little visitors who are here learning about sailing. But first, I want to welcome our guest, Aurora Yager, Deputy City Manager here in Wayzata. Aurora joined our staff in 2019 after experience at the City of Howard Lake and Eden Prairie. Recently, Aurora received the Aaron Sather Emerging Leader Award, that's a mouthful, from the NCMA. The award recognizes and celebrates members who have demonstrated significant promise of leadership and continued service. Almost exactly a year ago, Aurora was on the podcast to discuss and share about her experience as a woman in leadership in Wayzata, which is one of my favorite podcasts to date. Congratulations and welcome back to the podcast, Aurora.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's so good to be here. And we were just reminiscing beforehand about those early podcast days and how different that setup is from here. But yeah, I agree. That was one of my favorite episodes and super meaningful to me. It's
amazing how far we've come in a year, all thanks to Fred and Liv, who are in the background today. But again, we're so happy to have you. And I can't wait to talk about all the amazing things that have happened in the last year, but specifically about our community survey. But before we get to that, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about your role at City Hall?
Sure. So I wear a lot of different hats at the city. So I fill a lot of internal roles. So I oversee our administration, so finance, human resources, communications, along with our motor vehicle department. But then some of the other parts of my job that I really, really enjoy is helping lead the implementation of our strategic plan, just generally supporting the city manager and city council. So I'd say I get to have my hands in a lot of things. And so it's a really fun job to have.
So you're a Jeff Dahl 2.0.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Phenomenal. So you bring a lot of skill sets to the table. And one of them was sharing with us the results of the community survey we took that the community responded to. Tell us a little bit about that process, how we went through that, and then we get to dive into the results of the survey.
Yeah, so I was really excited for Wayzata to take on this project. A community survey is a tool that many, many communities use. I had been a part of that process a little bit when I worked for the city of Eden Prairie, but that was something new to Wayzata. And it was really important. A goal of this project was how do we get and make sure that we are kind of in step with what our community wants and what their expectations are. And it's kind of, you don't really know until you ask them. So that was kind of the goal going into this community survey. So we reached out to some other communities that have done this work before and got some recommendations on survey vendors and methods and things like that. And so that led us to select a Morris Leatherman company, and they've been in the surveying business for like 40 years or something like that, and have worked with countless communities and school districts on doing quality of life community surveys in particular. They've been doing for a long time. And so we met with them, and their methods were to survey 400 of our residents, contact them via a phone survey, and then compile all the data for us and report that out. And so the process, I thought, was a really great one because both staff got to think about what do we want to know from the community, and then the council, like you and the council members, had a lot of input on, we want to ask questions that we want the answers to. And so ultimately that led us to, I think, asking like about 150 questions, up to that amount, to 400 residents, which I think that number is really compelling because when you think about how many people show up to a public meeting, I would say I've never seen 400 people show up to a public meeting.
I'd agree.
And even when we do online surveys via Polco, we typically see responses. We get maybe 40 to 80, and that's great. And we would not diminish that kind of participation. We want to still see people in person or responding to those surveys online. But from 40 to 400, that's a huge jump just to reach that many people. So
absolutely, especially with the number of questions.
Yeah.
I was really concerned that people wouldn't take the time. And what I liked is that they made appointments. And this wasn't, I'm going to call it 6 o'clock and interrupt maybe supper time or family time. and expect someone to stay on the phone. It was really done in a very concise and professional and respectful manner of people's time. And I was really pleased that folks really did want to share their perspective and take the time out of their day to educate us on what they think about how we're doing our jobs and how we're representing the city and the services we provide to them.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think one of the good things about this type of survey is there was a good mix of closed-ended questions and open-ended. So people who, like, when we could ask just general questions, what do you like, what do you not like, they could just say in their own words what they truly think. So I felt like that made it more personable and professional for people who were taking the survey.
Absolutely. And this is something that will continue going forward every few years. Is that correct?
Yeah. So you see in some communities, they do it, after maybe 3-4 years. Other communities do it every year. So I think for us, just based on what we've seen in terms of turnover of our population, that might be something we do every 4 years or so, which I think is also good because then we can time it with strategic plan updates. So we can kind of directly incorporate feedback that we're getting from the community and use that to guide some of our long-term planning documents.
Absolutely. Well, and if there's anybody who is good at being at the helm of all of that planning now and into the future, it's you, which is why you're in the role you're in. So, all right, let's dive a little bit into the results of the survey.
Yeah.
So tell our listeners a little bit about what our residents like about Wayzata.
Well,
which is a big question.
That's a very big question. But I think overall, like something we were really pleased is that we got really resounding positive results. So overall, 90%, 98% of people rate the quality of life in this community as excellent or good. And what is especially unique about that rating is 42% of them rated it as excellent, which is way higher than the norm. So it's not only people that are like, oh yeah, I like it here. Like people really love and are appreciative of the quality of life that we have in Wayzata. And then that stands out amongst our peers that we can compare to.
Oh, fantastic. All right. People 40+% rated it as excellent.
Mm-hmm.
What issues did they identify?
Yeah. So of course, as people say what they like and good quality of life, there's also things, opportunities for improvement. And so some of those things I would say were high growth and high taxes. Those were rated much lower. I think 13% of people rated that as a concern, or 12%. So not rated super high. Actually, the highest rating we got of what's the biggest issue in Wayzata was nothing. So which is kind of funny,
Yeah.
but I think that says a lot about how high and how positive those overall quality of life ratings were, that when people were trying to think of what's an issue, they couldn't really think of anything. But I'm glad that we got that feedback to understand from in terms of growth and taxes, that is something the community is sensitive, that they're watching for. So that I think helps guide us when we work on projects, when we review applications, and when the council ultimately makes decisions, that we're aware that those are, maybe not their huge concerns, but they are concerns shared by our community members.
Absolutely. And we hear about those depending on what we may be reviewing as a council or discussing. So we're certainly aware of those, but it's really nice to see some data that goes behind that as well. Yeah,
because I think a challenge that I would imagine if I was in the seat that you're in, someone may email you or come to a community meeting saying this is a concern, but it's hard to know, is this widespread? Is this just affecting one or a few people? And so the benefit of surveying so many people is then we could better answer that question of like, yeah, enough people commonly identified this as an issue.
Absolutely. All right. So we got a little specific in the survey. And one of the areas we specifically focus on was the community's perception or how they feel overall about the first phase of Panaway, which is what we completed in 2021, if I remember correctly. My dates are maybe a little fuzzy. It took a while.
Yeah.
But what was the community's response to the first phase?
Yeah. So overall, this was a question very unique to Wayzata. There's only one Panaway. And once you build such a transformational project, I mean, we started that because it was, an initiative driven by the community. But once you go through the construction and people start using the site and stuff, it's like perception doesn't always match reality. And so we wanted to see, okay, now it's here. What do people think about it? And it really could have gone any way. And we were really impressed with that 81% of people rated the project positively. And so I think for several main reasons, they pointed to that they really like the addition of the trails going through town, the enhanced view of the lake. Again, when instead of it being a parking lot blocked by cars, now it's, open space and parkland and a place for them to just sit and enjoy the lakefront. And then just having that open space seating elements right downtown. That's what people liked about it a lot. But that's not 100%, but I think it would be unrealistic for 100% of people to rate something as awesome. So we got some good feedback from the 12% who had some negative feedback about the project. And I think most of those elements are not a surprise to us at the city. It's the feedback that we've been hearing from the community in general, mostly related to it being crowded. Mm-hmm. Or there's, increased traffic congestion and stuff like that down there. So it's kind of the push and pull of we want people to be down there and enjoying the space. That's what it's designed for. But then sometimes to some folks that can feel like, oh, that's too much. There's too many people or too much traffic there.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. We're always striving to find that balance.
Right.
Absolutely. All right. So, some other things that people found that responded positively to were the Wayzata Bar and Grill and Wayzata Wine and Spirits, which are city-owned and operated establishments here in town. Mm-hmm. So that was great to hear. And then what else did I'm trying to think about? We have public safety. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about the community's perceptions and feelings about their interactions with public safety, and that would be police and fire department.
Yeah, so this is, I think, in today's day and age, we're very conscious of that accountability that the public has of first responders. Are we doing a good job? And I think anecdotally, we could tell that there's a lot of community support for our fire department and police departments, but it's important to check that assumption and make sure that that's actually the case. And so there's one question specifically on the survey asking about our city services, and they asked about police, fire, water, sewer, city planning, building inspections, and our motor vehicle departments. And across all those services, we got an average rating of almost 98%. And it's like, oh my gosh, we knocked it out of the park on that. And
sure.
And I think what else is important about that is compared to other communities, that's way above the norm. Like that's abnormally high to get that positive of a rating. And I think that translates specifically for the police department and the fire department. That translates into some of our other ratings related to safety and quality of city staff as well.
Well, and I think I speak on behalf of the council since I'm the only one here. Mm-hmm. But it is something we've talked about with staff considerably, right? When we talk about our strategic plan, and we ask a lot because we also know that our community has high expectations.
Absolutely.
And that translates to the services we provide, the level of service we provide, the responsiveness, the type of response we give. And so those are our expectations, right? When we bring somebody on board or somebody works for the city and represents ultimately all of us. And I was so pleased to see those numbers. I think everybody was just incredibly relieved. We hear it, we see it, but again, as we've mentioned a few times now during our conversation here today, sometimes we don't know if it's just an anecdotal response. We like to think it's not, but again, the data shows that our staff is really committed to providing the highest level of service. Tell me how that service then and people's perceptions of that service translates then. So we had a conversation also about taxes and if people feel they're paying too much or too little or about the right amount. and if they'd be willing to pay for more. So there were a number of different questions kind of interrelated when it came to services and ultimately paying, because that's the way we pay for these services is through tax dollars.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. As someone who works in finance for the city, I was particularly interested in the results of that. So yeah, earlier on in our conversation, we talked about how there was some sensitivity to there's high taxes. But another question we asked on the survey was essentially like, for the taxes you pay, do you feel you get a good value for them? And 85% of our residents said, yes, they do. They see a good value in the city services that they're receiving based on the taxes that they pay. And so to me, that tells us that while we may have taxes that feel high to some people, that the services we're providing and at the level, the quality are meeting their expectations. And so exactly to your point, it's like they ask a lot. And if we're meeting that we're providing a good value to our residents. So that was something that I thought was, okay, that means that we're probably in a good lockstep with our community of providing the amount and the quality that they're looking for, that they see that value. If we saw those numbers change over time, that would be a good indication to us about, okay, how do we adjust it to make sure people do see that value? But to your other point, we asked a couple of other questions on would you support property tax increases to maintain services or enhance them? And interestingly, in our community, which was slightly different from some other cities surveyed, people were, I don't have the exact percentage in front of me, but very, very supportive of, yes, I would support a property tax increase to maintain services. So that tells me that they're satisfied with what they're getting now, and they don't want that to drop off or change. But to enhance services or maybe do things maybe more than we've ever done before, that's not really what they're interested in. So that's, I think, good for us to understand, both as staff and as elected officials, on where our community really wants us to make investments and improvements.
Okay. Well, thank you. Now, in terms of some of those tax dollars, they go towards police and fire. How did people respond in terms of feeling safe within the city?
Yeah, this was one I was especially proud of. 100% of our residents said they feel very or somewhat safe in the community. And I think that's a guiding point in why we got such high overall ratings in terms of our quality of life, because if you don't feel safe in your community, how can you enjoy it? So that shows that we're doing a great job with our police response, and some of the other things that people value about this community, like the quiet, peaceful, beautiful nature, that kind of carries through even in feelings of safety.
That's great. Did they identify any issues, or did anything bubble to the top in terms of their feelings of safety within their own home or when they're out and about in town?
Yeah. So when they were asked about basically what other safety issues or concerns they had, main themes around traffic safety. Okay. So things like speeding, people rolling stop signs, distracted driving, things like that all came to the top. And I don't think we're unique in that. You may have heard reports from across the metro during the pandemic, especially that speeding got out of control.
Yes.
And so now that traffic enforcement is becoming even, more of a priority for our local police department and many other police departments, I would hope that some of those concerns wane. But I think, traffic safety is always going to be a concern for folks.
Absolutely. And as we talked about, especially with Panaway, there are more people coming to town. It is a destination. Yep. And so there are naturally more vehicles, more pedestrians, more bikes. We have not only the lake as an attraction, but several parks. And then, of course, amazing restaurants and shops all around town. So, slowing down, right? Putting our phones away. It's a very small town. That is my one piece of advice to everybody who comes to Wayzata. Take it slow. It's a small town. It's okay. Yep. You'll get across town in about 5 minutes, but we want you to enjoy it. So heads up, foot off the gas pedal, and enjoy the ride. Yeah.
And the other thing I'd plug too is kind of based on some of the increased kind of comments we've heard from the community about, particularly on Lake Street, a lot of vehicle noise and speeding and things like that. In June, our police department did an initiative called No Tolerance Month. and they really, really focused on traffic enforcement. You may have heard this or seen this if you follow our police department's Facebook page or other social media, but just based on that effort alone, they saw a 52% increase in citations, 150% increase in written warnings, and over 100% increase in verbal warnings. So we really hope too that the education, the enforcement on some of those issues specifically will kind of teach those drivers to change their behavior.
Absolutely. There also seems to be a trend with louder vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've gone back, probably like clothing and every other trend, right? Certain things just come back around, and it seems like louder vehicles have become a trend. Not just with young people, but of all ages. And I know that was definitely a concern because
Absolutely.
We do also have people, it's not just a commercial core. We also have people who live right adjacent to this main area throughout town, but especially in that area where there was a predominant number of loud vehicles driving up and down the street to get to wherever they were going. And we were hearing about that. So whatever enforcement that the police did, it seems to be working. It seems a little bit more contained. So I think they got the word out.
Definitely. And I know that that's one of their high priorities. It's something we've heard from the community a lot, and something they'll continue to work on.
Fantastic. All right. Fire department also scored very highly as well. Any interactions with them? And what I really liked about these questions, they weren't intrusive in terms of trying to figure out why somebody may have had a particular interaction with either the police or fire. But I really like the fact that even if someone did have what might be perceived as a negative interaction, you get pulled over because you were distracted or you were on your phone. I would say, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I recall an overwhelmingly positive response to that interaction, and the level of professionalism and respect, and that just speaks to decades, generations of this small town expectation that we're neighbors, and that as a city we're going to treat everyone with kindness and respect and with the highest level of professionalism. So that was great to see.
Yeah. That's something, like you mentioned earlier, when we're looking for people, when we're hiring people, I mean, our core values are teamwork, friendliness, and responsiveness. And some of the ways we came about identifying those core values is because there is this value that the community places on. They don't want to just like have the quickest interaction. They want it to be personal. They want it to be kind of a more intimate customer service with a high level of respect. And so I think that part of our culture really showed through in the community survey results for, having such high ratings on customer service for police, fire, and then the rest of our city staff as well.
Well, and I'd be remiss to say, that motor vehicles. I mean, who rates motor vehicles really high? The people who come to Wayzata Motor Vehicles. And I have yelled at from the rooftops when people have asked me, what's one of your proudest? I can't take personal credit for it, but I was like, well, Wayzata Motor Vehicles has, a 4 out of 5 stars on Google. So there you go. For all those around the world listening to this podcast, it can be done.
It can be done, yes.
It can be done with the right team.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, because normally, I fret every time I have to go to, I have to say I fret if I have to go to motor vehicles because we don't handle everything at our motor vehicles.
Correct.
We can't do driver's licenses, as one example. So when I have to go to another one, I always have to take a deep breath. Remember, it's not ours.
Yep.
It's going to be managed differently. But, yeah, that is my goal, that maybe one day we'll do driver's licenses and then we'll have like 5 out of 5 stars.
Yeah.
Make everybody happy.
Right. But that's one like we had kind of heard, like you mentioned, we have Google reviews so we can get a little sense of how we're performing. But yeah, hearing a broad swath of our community saying, yes, this is an excellent service is reassuring.
And especially, it's a small office. And a lot of times, I mean, we put out chairs outside so people can sit down because the line can be long. During COVID, we implemented a displayed number system on the window so people could wait in their cars and be more comfortable while they had to wait for their number to be called. So despite all of that, the reviews are still high. And I think that speaks volumes to that entire team. And,
absolutely.
And under Nick's tutelage and direction. So hats off to you, Aurora, because I know you oversee that as well.
They've earned that all on their own. I mean, that team has we have a long tenure of people who've been there who have those same core values and community service and providing that personal touch, and it shows.
As we wrap up today, as you think forward in the next 3 to 4 years when we perform the next survey, what are some areas that you think you might want to dive into a little bit deeper, or questions you'd like to ask that we didn't ask this time around?
I don't know that there was necessarily a question that I wanted to ask that we didn't, but I'd be interested long-term how perceptions of Panaway change as that project gets built out in future phases. So we obviously asked questions about how people think about the first phase, and obviously we're still in kind of the growing pains of that. But as that project, gets fully constructed with the boardwalk and the section foreman house, and the eco and depot parks eventually, I think it would be just so interesting to hear what people like about them, how we're managing the changes to those sites. That's something I think that will be a really good pulse on the community to see what they think of that. And then ultimately, I feel like we got such positive results that it is such a challenge on us we've got to beat it the next time. We're
competitive that way.
We are. And so how do we maintain those very positive ratings or improve them or get more ratings from good to excellent? That we don't want to see any of that slip. We want to hold those high expectations, high ratings.
I think we'll all be holding our breath for those.
Yes, absolutely.
So if somebody wants to take a look at the report from this past year, where would they find that?
Yeah, so we've got that on our website. You can go to wayzata.org/quality of life survey. Yes, quality of life survey, all one word, no spaces. And that's where they can kind of see some kind of summary data points that we wanted to share and pull out from that survey. But if they want to look and see every single question, how people responded, they can do that too.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure we'll get a lot of hits on the website.
Yeah.
It is really quite interesting. And, it'll be fascinating to see if anybody goes and reviews that and then shoots us an email and says, all right, I agree or I don't agree. And hopefully they'll be selected next time for the survey because we want to hear from them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, Aurora, thanks so much. It's always great to talk with you. It's the second great time that we've had a chance to share each other's thoughts on something that has been really important, one on women's leadership within the city, and now on the community survey and how we're doing overall as a team. So thank you again. Thank you for your service. And thank you on your, congratulations, I should say, for your new role as the deputy city manager.
Yep.
Did I get that right?
You got that right. You nailed it.
Thank you. I want to make sure I get that right. So very well deserved. And so look forward to many more years of us working together on all kinds of new projects.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.